Okay, so let's get started. Welcome to today's webinar, Teachers Coaching Teachers, an English Australia webinar, which is presented by Juanita de Souza. Juanita has 16 years of experience in the ELT industry as a teacher, teacher trainer and academic manager, and she brings this wealth of experience to us here today, and also to her current position as Director of Studies at Kaplan International English in Manly. All right, Juanita, so let's get started.
Thanks, Sophie. So first of all, welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for so many of you deciding to tune in today. I'm going to first give you a bit of an outline, an outline to what I'm going to talk about today. So first I'm going to define coaching for me and for my context and what I see, how I see its role in supporting teachers. Then I'm going to describe for you a framework that I used with my team here in Manly, and then give you a couple of examples of how it's been implemented here at Kaplan International English Manly, and then we'll have some time for questions. So let's get started. So first of all, what is coaching? So I'm using this term coaching in the context that it's used in the corporate field as well, and how it is different to mentoring, because they are a little bit different. So first of all, coaching follows a systematic process, and the ownership of that process is with the coach. And this is different to mentoring in the sense that mentoring doesn't necessarily have to follow a systematic process, that it is a little bit more free. And if you think about some of the mentors that you've had in your life, you know, you might be just meeting with that person to bounce off an idea, or perhaps you want to have a career change and you want some advice on how to go about that. But it could be something very open-ended. But coaching is more specific. And that brings me to my next point, and that is that it focuses on specific goals or specific results. And the ownership of these belongs with the coachee. So that's to say that the coachee identifies the goal that they're aiming to achieve, and the process that's followed between the coach and the coachee is aiming towards achieving that goal. Whereas in contrast to mentoring, it isn't necessarily focused on a specific goal, but it's more focused on the whole development or the total development of the individual, or as is termed, the mentee. It's more career focused, it's more about facilitating growth. I mean, that's not to say coaching isn't facilitating growth, it is, but it's facilitating it in the context of that specific goal. Also, the coaching process is focused with issues of the present, so they may not be, it's not the long-term future, it's the immediate future and the now. And it can be professional and personal, as can mentoring. It can be, you can have a professional mentor or a personal mentor. But coaching is time-bound, so there is an end point. There is a time frame that is identified between the coach and the coachee on when the goal is going to be achieved, or, you know, within what time frame the goal will be achieved. The mentoring experience is more open-ended and can be never-ending, can be for life. So it's these reasons why I decided to implement this idea of coaching within my context rather than mentoring, because the idea of this experience is to help the teachers develop a goal, focus on how they're going to achieve that goal within a certain time frame, and hopefully achieve it. The other thing is that coaching is functional, so it has a specific purpose. The mentoring experience is more relational. It's more about the relationships between the two people, and other relationships even outside the mentoring relationship. So these ideas have been taken from the following sources. So for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to focus on coaching because it's more results driven and it has more measurable outcomes. But that's not to say that as academic managers or leaders or senior teachers in our schools, we can provide a coaching relationship to our teachers and also a mentoring one. One of the keys, though, about both a mentoring experience and a coaching experience is that it's most effective when the coach or the mentor is not the line manager of the person being coached or mentored. Because if it is the line manager, the relationship changes. It's less about development and achieving goals, and it's more about performance management, which is something that I will stress throughout this presentation, because the goal about this, implementing this idea of coaching into my centre, I wanted to focus on, excuse me, not on teachers achieving certain performance targets, but actually just developing themselves as teachers. So here's just a diagram just to give you a bit of context about how coaching fits into a traditional model. So on the left-hand side there, you've got more directive type of relationship where you're telling someone what to do or you're solving the problems for them. And on the other end of the scale is the coaching experience, which is more about asking questions, prompting, leading the coachee to the solution rather than actually giving them the solution. And in between that is mentoring, where the mentor gives advice, offers guidance, but perhaps doesn't probe and prompt as deeply as the coach might. So I put this in here just for you all to think about how these strategies are used with our students, because how I feel really is that as teachers, we do these things with our students. At times we have to tell them what the answer is, for example, or we have to tell them how to fix a certain issue with their language. Other times we might be providing advice or giving them support. You know, which exam course should they do? Should they do an exam course, for example? And then on the other end of it, we're also coaches. So I feel that an effective language teacher is doing all of these things already with their students. So that led me to thinking, well, if we're doing it with our students, why can't we do it with each other and supporting each other? We have these skills. Let's make use of these skills in professional development, which is why I started thinking about how teachers can coach other teachers. Just waiting for the slide to move. So the role of coaching in my context. So just to give you a little bit of context about where I'm working, which may be similar to your context. We operate on 5-week cycles. So every 5 weeks, students are tested. The staff base here it turns over quite a lot, not necessarily because people are unhappy, because it's more about the seasonal nature of our business, because we're based in Manly. The winter season is usually our off-peak season. So with that comes, changing student numbers and therefore changing staffing. So there's a greater ratio of casual to permanent or sessional staff in this particular centre, which I think is quite common in most private language ELICOS colleges, because we're all operating with a rolling intake. So I saw some models of professional development similar to this at both the EA conference and the NEAS conference last year, and but both of them being presented by university centres. Both of them very valuable models of teacher support and professional development, but not very workable in my context because of the nature of my staff turnover and the rolling intake and the 5-week cycles. So I needed to find something that I could implement here that would fit into our context. The goal I was also hoping to achieve was that the model would be empowering and self-sustaining for the teachers, i.e. something that they could continue to run themselves, and my input would not necessarily have to be that I could reduce my role in supporting it. And so that's why I thought this idea of coaching and teachers coaching other teachers would serve the purpose. So I was striving for all of these things, that the needs and the personal goals of the experience would be the focus of the professional development. So that is the needs and the personal goals of the teachers involved. That it needed to be flexible, and that'll come to light when I give you the examples, but mainly that if teachers are paired up with each other, I need to be sure that those two teachers are going to have enough time with each other, i.e. one of them isn't going to be leaving the site due to drop in student numbers or something like that. And also I was maximising the skills that teachers already have that they use to support their students, to use those skills to support each other. I'm very fortunate that in my context, I have a really collaborative staff room. I have a group of people that really enjoy working together with each other. So asking them to do that in a more structured way wasn't a challenge, because they already do it with each other informally. So the framework that I decided to work with is GROW. There are other frameworks out there in the coaching world. Another one that's quite common is CLEAR, and CLEAR is contract. So the coach and the coachee identify a contract that gives them the time frames, the goals they hope to achieve, that kind of information, and then listen, evaluate, action, review. But I decided not to use that one, mainly because the processes involved there would take more time, and I wanted something that could run in a shorter time frame. So just to give you a bit more information about what GROW is, this is some of the, this is what the acronym stands for. So the goals are SMART goals. So a SMART goal is specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, realistic and timely. There's a lot of information out there about SMART goals. It's quite a common model for identifying goals. I did do some training with my teachers about making SMART goals. The next part of it is the reality, so for the teachers to look at what obstacles or what pathways are present in their current context. So obstacles could be the nature of the classes they're teaching, the level, for example, could be time that they have to devote to developing their focus area. Also, pathways might be moving on to other courses, peer observations, things like that. Opportunities, so what's possible. So other limitations, for example, could also be technological related ones for those who identified technology as being their goal. So opportunities, what's possible, so what technology is available for them, what other resources are there in the centre, what other courses are available in the centre that they can explore, and then will, so identifying what they'll do and when they're going to do it. So we strive to identify all these things as early as possible in the coaching framework that we implemented so that the teachers could sort of get on and work on it. So the next slide here is just talking about how the role of the coach throughout this relationship changes, just like the role of a teacher changes in the classroom. So at times the coach might have to be a little bit more directive. They also would show or demonstrate or model certain techniques or strategies. One of the parts of this program was peer observations. So there's an opportunity there for the coach, for example, to demonstrate or model a technique or a strategy that they use that relates to the goal of the coachee. The coach might also suggest or be suggestive of alternative actions or methods that the teacher can use or the coachee can use. And most importantly, the role really of the coach is to stimulate, to prompt, ask questions, and problem solve collaboratively. This is really key because the solution, as I said earlier, really needs to sit with the coachee. So it really is the role of the coach to prompt and ask questions to help the coachee lead them to the solution. So these are sort of examples of the kind of support that the coach might provide the coachee. I think that they are also similar to some of the roles that we use in the classroom. Sometimes we have to tell our students, sometimes we demonstrate. In fact, hopefully we demonstrate quite a bit. We might suggest to our students, and we of course do ask questions and help the students come to their own solutions. So as I said earlier, this concept of a teacher being a coach isn't a stretch. It is just helping teachers focus on what they do in the classroom and how they can use those skills to support each other. So the next is moving on to the examples of how I implemented this in my centre. So I implemented 2 ways of helping teachers coach teachers, and the first one was a group approach, and this was incorporated into our annual professional development plan for last year and this year. And the participants were asked to come with a focus area, and they were paired up with a colleague who had strengths in that areas. So some of the examples of focus areas that the teachers came up with was, for example, moving from general English, teaching general English to teaching an exam course, or others came up with dealing with phonology in the classroom, because it is an area that teachers, especially teachers straight out of the of course, tend to avoid. Also, another teacher came because they wanted some support in clarifying grammar for higher level students. So that's some examples of some of the focus areas that were initially identified by some of the participants. They were paired up with someone, so I actually asked them to choose their own partner, and that worked well because, again, because of the nature of the team that I have here, they know each other well, they know each other's strengths and weaknesses. They're a fairly close-knit team and they have really good rapport, but the rapport between the coach and the coachee needs to be carefully considered. If I felt that a pairing didn't work, then I would have stepped in and had a bit of a chat to those people about rethinking who they wanted to work with, given A, the rapport, and B, the strengths that those different people had. So I guess the question is, how well do you know your people, or how well do your people know each other? That will then determine whether you can let that pairing work as a self-directed thing, or whether you as a manager need to step in and manage it a little bit more. So I was very fortunate because they gravitated towards people that I would have naturally put them with anyway. And then now I'll just give you a bit of an explanation about what I expected them to achieve through this process. So these are some of the okay, thank you. But it may be something that has to be a bit strategic. As a DOS, I may then actually see if the pairings are quite right and maybe not allow them to choose and just nominate someone they should work with. But I do think it's important they have some control over who's going to be their coach, because the rapport that they have with their coach is really important. It's got to be someone they like, someone they get along with, someone they can be open with. And if that relationship isn't there, then it's not really going to work. It's really important that this coaching experience, that the teachers perceive this not to be a performance review type of process, which is why I was really keen to hand it over to them and not be involved, because it's not about their performance, it's about them developing their skills and identifying an area in their teaching that they wanted to focus on. If it was a performance development issue, it would lie with me and it would be following a different kind of process. So after they identified their pairs, I don't know if you heard before, but I did also mention that relationship was a coach and coachee relationship, but they took turns. So they took on the role of being the coach and the coachee, and then they switched, and then they swapped, and then they were the coach to the other person being their coachee. And again, I kept them in the same pairings, but again, it might be something that in your context you might want to change it up, and they coach and coachee, and then they change the pairing and they work with a different person when they change the roles. Certainly in this process, there were people who gravitated more towards being a coach and didn't so much want or need coaching. But this was really with people who have really, really experienced teachers. But I did identify, and I did tell them that the whole point of this is that everybody gets a chance to develop. So even if they think that there is not something major that they want to address in their teaching, they could think of something else, maybe about relationships, building relationships with students. It doesn't necessarily have to be with teaching practice, but it could be about something else around their role in the school that they could get coaching on. So going into this process with the group, the outcomes that I expected from it, or what I hoped to get from it, is that the participants would meet regularly with their coach, that their personal coaching skills would develop and would inform their teaching a little bit more and how they support their students, and that they would see a measurable improvement in their focus area. So did I get those things? Well, first, this is the process that we followed. So we got together as a group. I started the discussion in the first group session with about teacher beliefs and what they understood to be effective learning and effective teaching, and what in their teaching they do to demonstrate these beliefs. That was just to get them engaged into thinking more deeply about what they do in the classroom and why they do it. Do they do it just because they learned it on their CELTA course and that's what you're supposed to do, or do they do it because they see that as being a useful tool to support their students? And then we paired up, and I got them to sit together with their partner or their coach and identify their goals. And the goals initially weren't specific enough. We had to work a little bit on making them really specific and really narrow to something quite measurable. And by the end of the session, we got there. We also had a chat in that session about how we would, what processes they would follow to support each other and to coach each other. And the thing that came up there would be peer observations. So I organised a peer observation schedule. Mainly, I just identified times where I could give them support in terms of cover so they could jump out of the classroom and go and watch their partner or vice versa. They then finalised the time and the specifics of the observations themselves. They also brought or gave their coach a peer observation task to do, which was designed to focus on the goal that they had identified. So some of them struggled to come up with a peer observation task, so we did go to some of the resources like Thornbury, Selter Book and other places to find existing tasks. But I do think that it's good for them to design their own task so that it's in line with the goal that has been identified and how their partner can help them. The reasoning behind using the peer observation task is so that the feedback would be structured and focused on a goal and not too global and too vague or not too nitpicky. I wanted to be sure that they gave each other constructive and useful specific feedback. So after they did the peer observations, we got together again for a second group session, and that session was to reflect on their peer observations and also to reiterate their goal if necessary, because after the observations some of them realised that what they'd identified in the goal wasn't really an issue or needed a little bit more work. Maybe they needed to rephrase it a little bit more. Then we also talked about some of the obstacles and pathways. So this is relating to the reality around them towards achieving their goal, and also some of the opportunities. Then I let them set them off to continue to work on their goals in their teaching and developing their teaching practice. And then they arranged another meeting with their coach to discuss how they felt they were progressing with their goal so far, and also for the coach to give them any suggestions or support on some of the issues that had come up or problems that had come up. I then encouraged them to organise a second peer observations for those ones who had very specific teaching things like clarifying grammar, for example. That was, a second peer observation was really useful for that. For the other ones who were thinking about teacher talking time as their area to work on, the second observation one was less necessary because they could do things like record themselves, scripting instructions, other strategies. So the second peer observation didn't occur for all of the participants. Okay, after that then we had a third group session, and this was really a review of the process and a chance for them to talk to each other and to other people about how they felt they'd progressed on developing their goal. Some of them hadn't felt the progress very much, so they reset the goal again. And I gave them an opportunity to find another coach if they wanted to continue working on it. But I have to say most of them were pretty satisfied with how they developed from that point. So this process took about 2 months, so it was fairly quick. A lot of things happened in this time. Then the next slide is just some of the feedback that I got from the teachers that were involved. They all found it to be useful. They all found having a chance to sit down with another teacher and a colleague to talk about themselves and their teaching practice and share ideas in a structured kind of organised way, very rewarding. They do it informally all the time, but to be able to, for me, for example, to be able to say, right, this is your time to sit down and talk to each other about your teaching practice and about what you want to develop, they found that really useful. They all agreed to meet their coach on a regular basis, and that was during the organised sessions that I had sort of structured into the program, but also afterwards. They all really felt that that person that they had been working with had a lot to offer, so they wanted to keep talking to them regularly. 50% of the participants felt that they would find it more useful if they had a chance to talk to different people on the same issue. So perhaps just one coach wasn't enough. Maybe they wanted to have that coaching experience with one person and then move on to another person and see what they had to say about it. And 75% of them saw benefits in the skills that they had developed in this process to their teaching practice. So to the third point, it wasn't really what I was going for, was for them to move around and talk to different people. What I really wanted to do was build and develop the rapport between the two individuals in each pair. So I did find it interesting that half of them thought talking to different people would be useful, which is why in the last session I encouraged them and said, okay, if you're not totally satisfied with the progress that you've made, go find another person and you can follow the same process again if you like. So now then I also, around the same time when I was implementing this group strategy, I also wanted to implement it on a more one-to-one individual basis. And I did that with two people, one of my senior teachers and one of my sort of mid-step teachers who was preparing to do her first Cambridge exam preparation course. This particular college has a long history of delivering Cambridge, and we have a I think, a very good reputation on the way that we deliver it. So every time a teacher starts teaching Cambridge for the first time here, it's something I have to approach very carefully because of the culture around Cambridge preparation in the centre. So the senior teacher that I chose to be the coach in this particular example was someone who had been delivering Cambridge preparation courses for quite a long time. So I was very confident in his delivery and his familiarity with the exams. And so they were buddied up together. This one I actually told them to work together. And I sat them down and we talked about the process and the framework that they'd be working within and how it would evolve. And what my expectations were from the experience in terms of building her confidence on the courses. The actual goals were identified by the coachee, so I then sort of said to her, Anna, go away and think about what specifically you want to develop while you're on this course, how this experience may be different to teaching intensive English courses or English courses, the needs of your exam students, and identify a goal. Then they went away and sat down and had their first session in identifying her SMART goal and all the time frames around it. And they met on a fortnightly basis regularly. I think at some points in the course they were meeting weekly to touch base and reevaluate what she was hoping to achieve. So these are some of the expected outcomes from this experience. So that the delivery of the less experienced teacher would be at the same level of the more experienced teachers, and that the coachee would feel supported, and very specifically supported by having that one person to go, knowing that they had that meeting set up at least fortnightly to evaluate their progress, and that that the support was consistent and targeted on the areas that the coachee wanted to work on, and not that situation of the more experienced people saying, oh, I do it like this, and when I do it like this, but more about questioning and asking about approaches and providing suggestions. Okay, so these two participants, I asked them for some feedback on the experience and what they felt they got from it. And they told me it wasn't difficult to arrange times to meet with each other. They were working on the same timetable, so actually finding time to be together wasn't so difficult. The coachee felt that her confidence had improved, that she got a greater knowledge about the needs of exam students, that she got positive feedback from her students from that course. Actually, that course of students, the feedback from them was overwhelmingly positive. So none of those students would have even had any idea that that was the first time that teacher had delivered a Cambridge preparation course. And that they felt it was flexible, and they were both appreciative of the opportunity to have that time with each other, and that came from both the coach and the coachee. So even though the coach was there as a support and a guide, and he still got a lot from the experience. So these are some of the because of course it wasn't all smooth sailing, and these are some of the challenges that I encountered along the way. The first one was timing. So I did feel that this was important enough to allocate some of the professional development time that we have scheduled to this program, and I felt that the only way that it was really going to be successful is if I used that time in this way. I mean, after all, it is professional development, so why not? So that timing and getting commitment from the teachers in terms of time, the best way to achieve that was that I told them, in terms of the group sessions, I told them when the group sessions would be, and that between those group sessions there would be certain things that need to do in terms of time. But also, of course, everybody's busy, so some of them were really great and used their time really wisely. Some of them didn't use it so wisely, and they perhaps didn't get as much from the experience. The other issue too was that some of the feedback that I got from some of the participants is that their coach didn't encourage so much self-discovery. Perhaps this is down to a bit of training, which I think is important in this situation, that the coach or the person acting as the coach is really aware that their role is to question, suggest, not to provide all the answers. And this is how I wanted this coaching program to be different to the kind of support that happens spontaneously in the staff room, in breaks and things like that. I hear a lot of it happening, and it's all really useful stuff, but it's a lot of, oh, last time I taught that I did this, and they pull out an activity from the book and from another resource, for example, and they use that. And that's really great, and that's really important part of the sharing environment that our staff rooms are. But I wanted this coaching experience to be distinct and to be a moment for them to sit down and come up with their own solutions. The other point there is that this idea of self-discovery is that they needed to respect the border of disclosure. And the border of disclosure really is that line of what they're comfortable talking about and what they're not comfortable talking about. So in the research that I've done on this border of disclosure is described as a circle. So you draw a circle, so the coachee and the coach when they sit down together, they draw a circle, and inside the circle is performance or personal achievement. And in that circle, they can note down all the things that they are comfortable talking about relating to their performance or their personal achievement. And then this is about their personal lives. And then anything outside of that circle or on the line of that circle is not for discussion. So there may be aspects of their teaching, for example, that they don't want to talk about. So those topics can go outside the border. So this idea of self-discovery is that the coach is trying to elicit, if you will, the solutions from their coachee, but without crossing the border. The next issue that came up was that the coach didn't know what kinds of questions to ask. So this, in one of the group sessions, we did some work on active listening. So, you know, language we use when we're listening actively, some of the techniques used in counselling, rephrasing. So, oh, so what I heard you say was blah, 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 blah. using some of these strategies so that if the coach doesn't know what to ask, they're at least then providing some listening strategies to their coachee so the coachee can think more about what they've said. So in terms of questions to ask, we also did a little bit of work on what types of questions to ask, so to keep the questions open-ended, to not ask yes or no questions, for example, to limit the use of A/B choice questions, but to ask more probing questions, to really get the coachee to think deeply about what's being discussed in that particular meeting. The other issue there that came up was that some of the participants didn't see measurable improvement. Maybe their goal wasn't smart enough, maybe it wasn't specific enough, maybe they need to reevaluate what they actually want to work on. And then, as I said in the final session, for some of the candidates, some of the participants, we restated some of their goals. And then finally, there was, actually I didn't really experience too much of this, but there can be some resistance. There can be some participants who don't really want to engage. And I mean, as I said, I'm very fortunate with the group of people that I work in. They're all very engaged in developing themselves and their teaching, but that's not always the case. And it's important that this process is about the coaching, is that the problem solving and ultimately the solutions are owned by the coaching. So it's not something that, the business wants them to do, or the centre needs them to do, or the students need them to do. It's something that they want to do. Also, some of the techniques that we use in teacher training when we're assessing candidates is to look at what's observable, what actually happened in the lesson. What did the students do? What did they say? What's evidenced? And I encourage the teachers when they were giving feedback to each other after the peer observations to focus on these things, not to worry so much about what didn't happen, but what did they actually see happen. So then also too, it becomes a little bit less about you and me, and it's more about the situation, and also to keep it framed within the goal. So I don't know how I'm going for time, Sophie, but I'm almost finished actually.
No, that's great. So it's 4:15. So if you're almost finished, then we'll take questions afterwards. Okay.
So this one. So then I sort of had some thinking about what's next and what can I do more to help my teachers and to propel this concept of coaching and teachers coaching each other in my centre. And what I think is the pathway to success is that the quality of the rapport between the coach and the coachee has to be good. But I will show you a diagram here about how we can describe that quality. And the next thing is that there's a mutual and clear understanding of the goals that are being sought to be achieved. So here in this little diagram, I quite like this because I think it clearly exemplifies an effective coaching situation. That what we're aiming for here is up in this top left quadrant of high clarity, high rapport. So that there's an open dialogue between the two parties, that there's a shared expectation of what they want to get from the experience, that they're open to benefit, to mutual benefit, but also that there's a sense of urgency. And this is this time-bound concept of coaching and how it is a little bit different to mentoring, that there's a time frame that we need to work within, and we need to achieve this within this time frame. When this happens, it's effective. The opposite end of the scale here is when the rapport is low and the clarity of the goal is low, and they're just going through the motions because someone said this is a good thing to do, or I've put everybody in a room together to get them to talk about it, and they're just in the room. And then in between that is, what could happen if the rapport is low, or what could happen if the rapport is high, but the clarity is low. This is a danger for, and I think happened for a couple of the participants in my centre, that they were quite they had quite a good friendship with each other, but they didn't stay within the bounding of the goal. And so they did sort of go off topic or on a tangent a little bit. And this relationship would have been a very successful mentoring relationship, perhaps not such a great coaching relationship, because they didn't focus and stay focused on the goal and stay focused on the time frames. So, in summary, really, I think for me it was a very rewarding experience to go through. I do think that the teachers have stronger relationships with each other as a result of doing it, and I'm seeking to continue it in my centre. Are there any questions?
So you can just type your questions and I'll relay them to Juanita. Okay, so a question from Hussein. Hi, Hussein. He's asked if you can recommend 1 or 2 primary authors in this field for further study.
Yes, yes. Actually, the next slide after my lovely beach picture, yes, just to remind you all I'm sitting in Manly, is my references. So there's some key thought thinkers in this area. Grant is a professor at Sydney University, so he's one of the leading thinkers in Australia on this idea of coaching. Bearing in mind, most of the research that's been done in terms of coaching and mentoring has been done for a corporate context. Although Grant, this first book here is actually a book that has been written for you to coach yourself. So it's got lots of tips and ideas on what you can do to be your own coach. So I found that one to be useful for me personally, and also there's a lot of tips in there about how you can implement it in a context like ours. And then the other one down here is Megginson and Clutterbuck, and they are both from the United States, 2 Davids. And this is also a good resource, this one, Techniques for Coaching and Mentoring. That last visual that I had, that 4 diagram one, came from this book. So again, lots of useful strategies in there. But really, this one is really for a corporate environment, but there's absolutely no reason to say that that wouldn't transfer to our context as well.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Someone else, Paul, has asked about the example that you gave with the senior teacher as coach and mid-step teacher as coachee. Yeah. Wants to know if the coach-coachee pairs are usually on the same level in terms of seniority or, experience.
Yeah, so in that particular example, they weren't, because the coach was a senior teacher. But as much as that person was a senior teacher, in terms of our structure, the teachers all report to me directly. The senior teachers are there more as a support rather than a manager. So even though there was a senior teacher and a teacher, there wasn't a direct reporting relationship there, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I think it's important, that's important, because as I said, if I go in and, as a director of studies, when I go and sit and I observe the teachers, they don't see it always as me there to support them. They see it as me checking up on them, which is not how it is. But because of my role and, our relationship and how they, the structure of the company, that's how it's perceived. And I wanted it to be really clear to them that this whole experience was not about that this was just about support and development, and that's it.
Okay, sure. There's just a technical question. Meredith has asked how we see the questions that people are asking. The answer to that is they only come through to me and I'm relaying them. So the other participants can't see the questions, unfortunately. There was another question about how much time in total do you think the teachers spent on this outside of the classroom, and did any of them ask to be paid for extra time if they were casual?
So that's why I structured in those group sessions, because I wanted them to, if they felt that it was going to eat into their time too much, I wanted them to at the very least engage in the group sessions. To be honest, none of my casual teachers asked for money, and they were all engaged in the process. And the timing in terms of outside of the group, and the group sessions were sort of 1 hour, so it was 3 1-hour PD sessions, and outside of that it fluctuated a lot. The teachers would get together when they sort of sat down and got together with each other. They might have had a 20-minute discussion. Some of them might have had an hour-long discussion. It was really up to them, and I mean, that part of it was up to them. It was on them. But I think that I was quite lucky because the group of people is very dedicated, and because of the way our timetables are structured, there is a lot of overlap in terms of when a casual teacher would arrive to come prep for their class, for example, and when another teacher might be finishing their class. So they'll use that overlap time to sit down together to reflect on it. But they did only meet sort of once every couple of weeks, so it wasn't like an every week thing, and I don't think any of them found it to be an imposition of their time because they found they got something from it.
A few people have asked about the feedback. Francis wants to know, how is feedback collected from participants? I
mean, the feedback that I got to see how they felt about the process.
Felt about it, and if you know, what they'd got out of the process.
Yeah, so I did that anonymously.
Yes.
So I just gave them a paper. I emailed it to them to print and to type and print if they wanted to, so that I didn't have to see their handwriting, or they could have just handwritten it, and I just had a box for them to put it in when they'd completed it. I wanted it to be anonymous because for me it was more really about the whole process, rather because I could see who was getting a lot from it in the group sessions as well.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. And Jennifer would like to know if you can give some specific examples of the types of questions or how to frame the questions that the coaches ask.
That's hard because it depends on what you're talking about.
Sure.
But I do have, not with me right now, but I do have another slide, or some of the slides that I used when we did the session on questions and question types. So perhaps, Sophie, I can send that through. Maybe we can tack it onto the end of these ones.
That'd be fantastic. So I'll be uploading these slides and the recording to the English Australia website, so I can also upload that slide as well. Okay, well, we've probably got time for one more question. Ella wants to know, from your feedback, what do you think are the benefits for the coaches in this process?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I wondered that too, especially, well, remember in the group, when we did it as a group, they took turns with each other. When I did it with the individuals, yeah, because the feedback from the coach, from my senior teacher was, you know, that he enjoyed it. I think for him, how he identified that to me was that he found it useful because in supporting someone through the course, in supporting someone through delivering their first Cambridge preparation course, he had a chance to sit back and reflect on what he does, and perhaps working with that less experienced teacher, even though he was the coach, he got new insights on how she approached things with new eyes or fresh eyes. So it made him think about what his own practice and how he delivers it. For the other coaches in terms of the group sessions, I think some of them, again too, especially some of my more experienced teachers, they said to me, I mean, because I had the formal feedback that I elicited anonymously, but there was lots of impromptu conversation about it happening through the process. And some of the more experienced teachers said to me that they really enjoyed it because they, again, got to see some teaching practice through different eyes, and that some of the issues that popped up were things that they hadn't really thought about, and they hadn't thought that someone might have an issue with organisation, for example, or might have an issue with a loud voice. And so they felt that was a useful thing to think about for themselves. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
It does, yeah, no, it's very, very interesting, in fact. Okay, well, it's probably time to finish. If you wouldn't mind just moving on to the last slide. There we go. There was one other question from Joseph, who asked if we could clarify what SMART goals are, because he had a tech issue. Joseph, I'd probably just look it up online. I'm sure there's a lot of information about it out there. Would there be, Juanita? Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, there's a
so thank you again, Juanita. It was a fascinating process that you talked about, and I'm sure everyone will agree that the real life example of your staff room really brought the process to life. So thank you for sharing that with us. Thanks also to Apana for doing, the bulk of the organisation with you to get this happening.
Yes. Yes.
And for doing such a great job while I was on maternity leave. If you have any questions, please email me. My address is up on the screen. And also, if you want any more information about staff professional development, last year English Australia published a best practice guide to managing professional development. And it has lots of specific staff room examples, just like the one that Juanita was talking about today, and you can download that from our website. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you especially to the group of 25 teachers in Latrobe, Melbourne, who are all tuning in together. I hope you all enjoyed it.
Fantastic. I hope you got something from it.
Oh, I'm sure everyone did. Thanks, Juanita.
Thank you.